Countdown to Halloween, featuring Gregory Miller's Dark Nights and Candlelight, 31 Tiny October Tales. Every night at exactly midnight, a new story will appear on StoryLink Radio's YouTube channel. You'll have 24 hours to listen, then it will disappear and the next one will appear. Plan to catch these each day or you'll miss one. Each story will be 2 to 13 minutes long. If you haven't already, be sure to listen to the introduction to the book right here on this channel. And now, tonight's story from Dark Nights and Candlelight, 31 Tiny October Tales. October 12th, The Favor. The house itself was a ghost, of course. Why else would it only appear one night a year, on Halloween, then disappear into ethereal mist and fog, gone for another 364? It was such a huge ghost, such an extraordinary occurrence that it should have been famous the world over. But it remained safely obscure for two reasons. First, it only appeared deep in the wooded hills outside a tiny isolated town, so no casual passerby would ever happen upon it. And second, only children could see it. After their 12th Halloween, it disappeared not only from sight but from mind, forgotten except in the deepest fever dreams of their adulthood. And sometimes, very rarely, in their 30s, 40s, 70s, or 90s, they would see something. An autumn glade buffeted by cool wind, maybe. Or hear something. Perhaps the creak of a porch swing left over from summer. Or smell something. A backyard bonfire, hot cider and cinnamon. The inside of a jack-o'-lantern lid after the candle had burned out and Halloween was over. And they would feel a sudden ache, a deep yearning, a delicate sense that they were knocking on the door of great and lost memory. And then that feeling would fade, and the door of the memory recede, still firmly locked. But somehow, the children of Still Creek always found the house, generation after generation. They were drawn to it like moths to a flame, and never spoke of it save to one another. And this year, this special year, Jack Malley had plans. And that's how my great-uncle Dan started a story. He had dozens, hundreds maybe. No one really knew or could know how many. It's possible he made up some on the spot, but other old favorites he'd dust off just about every October, either volunteering them up himself or giving in to a request from one of us kids. Looking at his life without knowing him, you'd never guess he was a born storyteller. He didn't go to college. He worked 45 years as a plumber, and he and Great Aunt Gertie couldn't have children, so he didn't have the practice of some fathers when it came to keeping kids entertained. But none of that means anything when you stop a moment and think it over. Knowing a person's job and family habits only tells you so much. Thing is, Uncle Dan read. His library card was in tatters, and after he died, he left our town library $36,000 for renovations. And though he never wrote his stories down, that's where and how he learned to tell them. I'd say he was as fine and educated a storyteller as anyone some uptight Ivy League school or precious arts college ever let loose in New York City or Breadloaf. But he kept those stories for October, and then only for us kids. Every October 1st, he decorated his little house, and from that evening on, after work, he'd sit on the porch swing among his jack-o'-lanterns and tin witches. That meant we could go and see him and sit with him too, and that he was open for business. Not just us nephews and nieces, but all the town kids. Sometimes there'd be just 3 or 4 of us. Sometimes, mostly later in the month, there'd be over a dozen. It's just what we did. None of us ever got self-conscious about it, though every year some older kids would drift away. My dad said most went missing from the porch for a couple of decades and then came back to the folds with kids of their own. That's what Uncle Dan meant. He was as much a Halloween ritual to our town as anything you buy in a store or see in the movies. And then one day, Dad got a call from Aunt Gertie. 2 weeks later, Uncle Dan was dead. Well, lots of people visited him during the 2-week period before he passed, but not many kids. He didn't take it personal. Said it was because they saw him as a part of Halloween. And here he was, sick in April and stuck in a shared hospital room, not on his porch with leaves falling, wood smoke in the air. He said that was good and right. A person should be remembered on his good days, doing what made him happy. I was 12, and I was squeamish about hospitals and illness and death. But I was one of the few kids who went to see him. Fact is, I went every day. He had lung cancer. So long undiagnosed, there wasn't anything anyone could do. And hardly any time left to let it sink in for everyone. And yes, he had some bad days during those last weeks when the pain and the reality got to him so he couldn't hide his distress. But like he said, those should be forgotten in the favor of the good. And there were some good days then, too, in spite of everything. And on the very last one of those good days, when he was alert and in command, though plenty weak, he patted my hand. I remember how cold his was. He said, "I wish it was October so I could tell you a story." "Just rest, Uncle Dan." That's what my mom told me to tell him if he tried talking too much. "Nah, he shook his head. "Dying is boring. Talking keeps it fun." "I wish it was October so you could tell me a story too," I said. "Oh, yeah, you kids always liked them. That made me so happy." "Well, they made us happy." He shrugged. The paper hospital gown crinkled. "You know something I realized about stories, kiddo?" "What?" He gestured me in closer, and I leaned in. "While I live, I am me, and the words are the story." And after you die?" I asked it directly, tactlessly, the way children often do. He smiled. "Oh, now, that's where it gets interesting." He coughed harshly and cleared his throat. "After I die, I become the story, and the words become me." He didn't give me time to respond. "Over the years, every time I went for a walk in town, every time I looked, I saw my children. And right now, you're the only one of them here. How fortuitous. You always listen so well. I loved watching your reactions. So I have a favor to ask you, kiddo. I hope it's not too much." I was 12 years old, scared and sad that a life was coming to an end right there in front of me. What favor could I ever do for him? But I nodded, and he said, "I'm about to become all that I leave behind. Take good care of me." And that was all. And now, 30 years later, a handful of Uncle Dan's stories remain, given life by my words. Sometimes I tell them in the library story hours. Others at scout meetings or classroom assemblies. I told one to my own children just last night in the glow and scent of a wind-whipped October evening campfire. The words and the fire, tiny, comforting lights in a sea of fearsome darkness. In fact, the story I told them last night was the one I began this little remembrance with. You want to know how it ends? And so, that night, Jack Malley remained at the haunted house. Even after all his other friends left. Even after it disappeared with the dawn for another year. And he was never found or seen in town again. And his friends, now too old, forgot all about the house and couldn't remember what had happened to him. Had he moved away? But other, younger children still saw him, all down the years, one day a year when they went to the house like generations of children before them. And there he took them inside, and he and all the other children who lived in the numberless rooms out of time showed the visitors all of its mysteries and wonders and ancient secret magics. But once in a while, his old friends would see something. An autumn glade buffeted by a cool wind, maybe. or hear something. Perhaps the creak of a porch swing left over from summer, or smell something. A backyard bonfire, hot cider and cinnamon, the inside of a jack-o'-lantern lid after the candle had burned out and Halloween was over. And they would feel a sudden ache, a deep yearning, a delicate sense that they were knocking on the door of a great and lost memory. That in some profound way, in avenues of thought deeper than remembrances, they would think of Jack. You've just heard tonight's story from Dark Nights and Candlelight, 31 Tiny October Tales from author Gregory Miller. You can get this book right now on Amazon at the on-screen link, and Kindle Unlimited users can borrow a copy of the book for free. You can learn more about Gregory Miller and his many amazing books and projects at his website, On Screen. If you have not already, be sure to listen to our event video here and visit our event website to learn all about our upcoming events. Remember to come back after midnight for our next tale. Oh, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button for StoryLink Radio.